conversations about culture and Christianity. My name is Eric, and today I'm joined by Jess.
Hello, world.
And Alex.
Do you guys have your costumes picked out?
For what?
Halloween?
Oh, no. I don't know.
Not yet.
I don't celebrate the devil's
Good. That was
holiday.
a trick question.
Oh, I passed.
That was
scared.
a trick question. Eric passed. Jess, you failed.
I did. I do go trick or treating with the fam.
Yeah.
But fun fact about
Probably
me,
a witch costume, huh?
I think we've talked about this before. I trick or treated for the first time in my life when I had kids. I never did.
Yeah, same.
Here's my public service announcement to the listener, though. If you are not going to be hanging out with your neighbors when they're actually showing up to your house with their little kids in costumes, even if you hate Halloween and you think it's the most evil thing in the world, this is one of the most prime times to actually build relationships, meet your neighbors, and be a representative of Jesus, no matter what you believe. Off the soapbox.
What if you live in a neighborhood where everyone turns their light off and nobody's outside and they all hide from trick-or-treaters every year? Then what do I do?
Then you go knock on the door and tell them.
You go knock on the door.
They don't have any candy. What am I going to get?
He's going to give them the good
It's
news.
still sociably acceptable, I think. They'd be, oh, I didn't notice your lights were off.
It's going to be like that scene in Big Daddy where the guy's like putting antacids in my
that's part of it.
bucket.
But, I mean, for the most part,
yeah,
that's not the reality.
I think
that
is a good.
Just
Maybe
a reminder
I
to the
should host
Christians
a
out
block
there.
party for Halloween.
You've got time, couple weeks.
If you're listening, donate candy to my block party. And then, I'm just kidding.
Trucker Andrew, any candy fall off your truck lately?
Trucker Andrew.
Oh,
Sometimes
I still
one
have
of our
some
listeners,
Jolly Ranchers.
Trucker Andrew, he is a truck driver. If you didn't get that part,
he's been taking some time off. I think.
he has. But sometimes he's taking candy or other loads to places, and candy will fall out, and they can't give it away. So one time he gave us
a lot of Jolly Ranchers.
a lot of
Wait,
Jolly
they can't
Ranchers.
sell it, but they can give it away.
Starburst.
And of all the people
we won't say his last name in case he's not supposed to do that.
Yeah.
But
What's that, Jeff?
He thinks of us
he
though.
does.
Oh,
So
he's
we
so
love
nice.
you. We're
Very
thinking of
nice.
you.
Yes.
Yeah.
We have empathy for you.
I was going to say, thanks for stealing my transition. Empathy. That's what we're going to talk about. Specifically, a little bit about the word. I mean, it seems like a very broad subject. I understand that. But recently, there has been some backlash to the word, to the concept, even as far as to go to say it's sinful by some people. And I think I personally consider myself an empath. And maybe I'm misinterpreting what that means, but I don't know if it's part of my hypochondria mixed with being very sensitive to body language and people around me and the circumstances they're going through, and then coupling that with people pleasing. I think I can feel someone's, like when someone else is in an uncomfortable situation, it's not always, I don't think it's just secondhand embarrassment or secondhand uncomfort. I feel like I have the ability a lot of times to kind of sit with people in that space and really feel what they're feeling. And that's what I understand empathy to be, is when you're going through something, I can try my best. And oftentimes, even when I don't want to, I end up feeling that stress and those emotions that you're going through. And maybe someone would say, well, that's sympathy. That's not empathy. You got it wrong. I don't know. I'm open to being corrected, and I'm really glad that the one and only Jess Hawley's here to help set the record straight.
When you're saying you have empathy, like when you hear somebody else, do you also think about your own experiences to help you relate more to that person? Like, or does it make you think of like a past
I feel
experience?
like I've been trained to go, okay, always talking about my dead mom on here. That's weird.
No,
but
well,
I
we
think
love
that's
talking
one
about
of the
her.
I think that's one of the things that helped me, because like a lot of times people will say, oh, you don't start with that. Like if I meet someone and their parent has passed away, it's sometimes in my mind, I'm like, it's easy for me to go, oh yeah, I'm so sorry that happened. I know what you're going through. I know what you're dealing, which is true to a certain extent, but also inaccurate, because I don't know what their relationship was with. I don't really know exactly what they're going through. And so I think for me, I'm always hesitant in any situation to try to Oh, yeah, me too. I've got the same situation, or I've got a similar situation, but I don't verbalize it as much as I actually internalize it. And so I'm reaching to those things in my life, those experiences that I've had, to find something close and to where I can try to, or at least,
that's empathy.
A lot of this is where irony is really going to come into play on this one. I listened to a lot of talk radio as a young kid. It was very formative to me. My dad always had AM radio on when we were installing carpet in houses and things like that. And I listened to a lot of Rush Limbaugh and a lot of Dr. Laura Schlesinger. And one of the things that I picked up, like she would talk about it all the time, was like putting yourself in someone else's shoes and like trying to understand their perspective. And it was just something that it really just kind of fused in my brain somewhere. And that's kind of the perspective I try to take now, is if there are a lot of situations, a lot of people that do a lot of things and say a lot of things and act certain ways that I disagree with and I think is maybe childish or ridiculous or borderline mental health disorder. But if I do try to take the time to put myself in their shoes and understand the circumstances that they're in, the upbringing that they had, the context of their social economical status, their race, their gender, all of those types of things, if I try my best to go, okay, well, yeah, I may not have experienced that, but in my life, I've experienced, judgment, prejudice, whatever towards me for other reasons, I can empathize. That's a long way of getting to what I, at least in my mind, am rationalizing empathy as.
I would say that's empathy. It's being with somebody, thinking about your past experiences and relating it to how they're currently feeling. And then I would say, like, the difference between empathy and sympathy is a little more distant, where you're looking at somebody and you're like, oh, I feel sorry that they feel sad. But your feelings are still a little more separate, but you can still feel like, I recognize this. I feel bad for this person. But empathy is like, your body is involved, like your emotions, you're recalling something. And that's why I think that it can, we'll get into it, but it can be like a good or a bad thing, depending.
Well, I think the good thing for our listeners today is they get to know that they get to hear from Eric, who's very empathetic, and I have zero empathy in my bones. I hate empathy. I am the least empathetic person I know.
That's good.
And I think it's weakness, cowardice, sin, all of no. I think
Reformed bro Alex on the podcast.
I think Alex.
If
he hopped right off that soapbox about
if people are anti-empathy, I think they're gonna probably not like this episode, because I would say probably all three of us, and probably why we love and said yes to being on this podcast is, I think we're all passionate about not just our own empathy, but helping build empathy. Like that's why we bring people on with stories. We want to put people in position to stories and posture themselves in a way where we're helping build empathy, because I think all of us have seen that it is something maybe that's lacking and we want to help people with. And so I think that's just probably a reality too.
I think, and for me, there has been so many experiences that I can't. Okay, this maybe isn't the best way to explain it, but it's just what came to mind. If a family member or something someone's going through something, sometimes it's easy to go, okay, well, I'll blame this and I'll blame that, and that's why they got themselves in this situation or whatever. And I maybe can be sympathetic, but I'm not empathetic. But I can remember when my daughter had a pet rat and my son had a gerbil or hamster, one of the two, and they both died on the same day. I don't know how to explain that, but they both died on the same day, and both my kids were heartbroken and sobbing.
Did that happen here?
When I worked here, yeah.
Okay, I was going to say, I remember this
and
day.
They were little at the time. And if that wasn't empathy I was feeling in that moment, I don't know. That is not sympathy. I wasn't being sympathetic to them. I wasn't being like, oh, that's too bad, I'm sorry that they died. No, I was watching them sob and cry and face death for the first time and try to wrap their heads around it at a personal level. And I was heartbroken. I didn't care about the rat or the gerbil. They were stinky, messy. I didn't like cleaning them up after them. And I just thought they were kind of whatever. But so how is that not empathy? If I didn't care about the animal, really, but I cared about how the death of the animal affected my children, because of how that to me is what empathy is, because I was connected there. My heart was hurting. My heart was breaking for what their heart was breaking for in that moment. I don't know. I mean, I'm sure there's someone who's could dissect that and try to say that's not the same thing, but I think for me, that's what that is.
Yeah. And I think in short, I mean, Jess was giving that definition, you know, the difference between empathy is feeling with and sympathy is feeling for. I mean, I think that's a probably oversimplified way, but for us to frame the conversation. But Jess, I know you've obviously done a lot of this is studying this.
I feel like empathy is like part of my job. Like whether I feel like it or not, some days, like it is a skill that I have to have and that I have to engage with, and I have to watch out for burnout and what that does to my body and what that does to my mind. I think that like a lot of times, I just want to say this to the bros, Alex, that empathy is criticized and spoken as weakness in a lot of circles. Like if we think about like with the bros or like political or religious circles, because it challenges dominant values and it challenges some control and ideals that we have about having ideas or like these are the steps of how this works. And so a self-sufficiency, and it forces us, and empathy forces us to step outside of ourselves and to feel that discomfort for the sake of other people. And that is why a lot of people I think don't like it, because it's this discomfort that's like, it challenges a lot of like dominant things in those areas. So why would we, when it's like, okay, like in politics, it's like, why would we do this when these are the laws? Like these are the facts.
It lets you stay logical, and logic tends. I don't know. I don't disagree with that. A lot of time, like I probably lean more in my day to day when I'm approaching a situation. I'm gonna go logic first.
Yes.
Call that manhood. Call that whatever. If that's what it is, I don't think so. But I think it's just a personality trait. I tend to go for the logical thing, but there's just a difference. And I think when you're governing, so when it's in government and you're talking about, here's all these people and we've got to meet lowest common denominator.
You can't go down into all your feelings.
We can't have the feelings. We can't connect to each person individually. We can't know the lot of the life of everybody.
Exactly.
So we are going to have to make these choices based in logic.
But I think
that's where people get at it. But then there are just things where like making wise decisions about the outcomes of other people's lives that you need empathy, I think.
And I think being able to relationally separate those things. I was watching someone on some social media platform the other day who was a pastor, and one of the things he said was his thesis was pastors, church staff, stop calling each other family and start calling each other a team.
Yeah.
You know, because
I saw the same one.
Yeah, because I probably did because you liked it and then it showed up on my algorithm. So thanks.
I didn't,
but I thought that was a great example of sometimes we want to placate the family idea. And yes, at the largest extent, we are the family of God. Those who are believers. But at the same time, how you deal with family, the relational equity, all that kind of stuff, and a team, those are just different dynamics. And so separating the two is wise, kind of like what you're saying, Eric. You have to be logical. You've got a job. You've got things that people are counting on you to do. And so where do you separate the two of those things versus how you're going to respond to? It doesn't even, like if my rat died, you know, like you can be empathetic and stuff. But if I was like, dude, and I got to take a couple weeks off, you're going to have to be like, Alex, dude, I'm sorry that you're struggling, but like, you can't take 2 weeks off because your rat died. Because here's all the ripples that happen from that. So I care for you. I'll pray for you. And so I think just those dynamics of how you're going to treat the two things are just a big
I didn't mean
deal.
to laugh at your loss, but
it didn't
it was a
happen.
very funny scenario. Yeah.
So, but I think that's just the difference. Jess, tell us a little bit more about just how empathy does affect our lives, you know, physiologically and all that kind of stuff. I think it'd be good to know.
I'll just go through like real quick how this works. So we have mirror neurons in our brain that fire not only when you act, but also when you see someone else act or express emotion. So like say you saw somebody stub their toe, your brain can simulate that experience. So you might like wince in pain, or like a lot of times like I'll get a chill like if someone tells me something that they did. And then you have a nervous system response. So empathy triggers your autonomic nervous system. So like if somebody cries in front of you, you might feel uncomfortable, or a lot of times I will cry with somebody else because I start feeling their emotions. Hormones and chemistry. Empathy involves oxytocin and cortisol, and your body literally chemically shifts in response to someone else's emotional state, or it can. And then facial expressions. And then our gut and our heart responses. Our gut-brain axis plays a role that you might feel like in the pit of your stomach when you're empathizing with someone's grief. Your heart is involved. Your heart rate might change when you're listening to somebody. And then there's this embodied lived experience. When you empathize, your body recalls its own stored experience of pain, joy, or fear. That's why hearing about someone else's suffering can make your shoulders tense, or hearing about joy can make you feel light and expansive. So if you ever want to learn more about these things, I would say spiritually, you could look up Kurt Thompson does a ton of study about the brain, but then Daniel Amen is one of the leading researchers in the country about brain health and brain development. And this is where a lot of this information came from, is from him.
And I think where it probably diverges is everybody has different experiences, and how the different experiences we have shape our, because empathy is not just a personality trait, right? And so, but traumas can either make people maybe even more empathetic, but traumas can also stunt people's ability to have empathy. And so even that, even in the same family, two people that could have the same traumatic experiences, one of them could be overly empathetic maybe, and the other person could be just stunted from abilities to feel empathy and those types of things. So it's not just like this personality disorder or order. It's not based on personality, but it's based on so many other wirings, I think, inside of us.
Well, and we should have put a warning up for people who are sensitive to animal death, because here I go again. But I would almost use the example of, okay, imagine a father, he has a son and a daughter, and then this is a made up scenario, so maybe it doesn't fly, but I have friends who grew up on farms, and a father who talked about stories of this too. And you've got Old Yeller and that sort of thing of okay, when your animal's sick or whatever, you got to put the dog down. It did something bad or whatever. You got to shoot the dog and kill it. You could imagine a scenario where you have a father and then his son and daughter, and he tells the son, okay, time to put, Spot down, and makes the son kill the dog because that's what you do. And he's trying to make him a man. Now, the outcomes of that are, okay, now potentially the son is completely shut off to his emotions because he's not really, he has to just do this act and he's being forced to do it. The daughter could be completely traumatized by losing her pet, the family pet or whatever. And then these two people, where they diverge in their life, is one has empathy and one doesn't. And, the guy's driving around with a pickup truck that has the sticker on the back that says, whatever, I don't care about your emotions. And the daughter's someone who's empathetic because they lost a pet, and they're feeling that and allow themselves to feel those feelings. And it's just, I think it's that we are, like you said, Alex, we are just products of a lot of what has happened to us and what we are able to tune into and what we believe ideologically. If you're taught that being a man is to be emotionless and logic, then that's how you're going to act, because you were taught by a parental figure or someone that had influence on your life that's the way it is. And then that's where maybe the gender assignments happen, where it's oh, okay, yeah, well, if you're feminine, it's a feminine trait, like you said earlier, Jess, that empathy is more of a feminine.
Maybe,
thing.
but I also would say that empathy is considered something that is able to grow and change. So it's not like, Eric, you were born with all your empathy and that's all that you're going to have. Or Alex, you weren't born with any, and so you're just hosed forever. It's that's something that can grow and change and develop.
Yeah, there's been a lot of talk lately in culture from different thought leaders or just people in general who have influence. There's some quotes out there, and we have the Alex, you provided some of the longer quotes, so I think I'm going to go into that. Let's see. I'm going to start with Joe Ringy. I don't know if I'm pronounced. Is it Rigney or Rigney, maybe. I don't know. I'll just go with Rigney. He's quoted as saying, "When empathy is unhitched from the truth, it becomes an idol and a god, and feelings create tyrannical idols and gods." So I mean, that sentiment is where he's. I mean, I don't know. What do you guys think about that? I don't want to just speak on his behalf, but does that seem like a balanced take? Does that seem?
Can you read that again?
Yeah. When empathy is unhitched from the truth, it becomes an idol and a god, and feelings create tyrannical idols and gods.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a truth to the fact that empathy does have to be tethered to truth, and I think where people maybe get messed up in the idea of it is I can see people like, so for example, I have a sibling that's trans, and because we still have a relationship, because I have empathy for people that are a part of the trans community or LGBTQ plus community, because I've sat with them through just some of the pain and some of the gender dysphoria stuff, and sat in the room with them when they've cried and said, "You don't know what it's like," and I don't know what it's like. That and because I call my sibling she, their preferred pronoun. There are people that will take that and then assign that I'm affirming everything about somebody's life because of my empathy.
Yeah.
And so they would say, well, because I'm empathetic towards them, because of that I'm being a coward. And I've had, sit down meetings with people that have had this conversation with me without knowing all the nuance in the relationship, without knowing
years and years of relationship,
not knowing the direct, blunt conversations we've had about identity and so on and so forth. And so that person or people sometimes will assign that empathy, my caring, to an acceptance, a level of acceptance. And there's this truth that to accept everything about someone, for my kids, I don't accept all of their behavior because I love them. Yeah. And so I have to have those kinds of confusion, those conversations. So I can see how at his core, I don't even know him, or what he's saying. So I can see where, if he's going that kind of direction, that we can't untether it from truth. I don't know why I said truth, but I'm a rapper now. I feel like I don't know what's going on. Anyway, can someone else talk?
Would you like to wrap the next quote?
All right, I can go to, unless you had something to add, Jess. Are you good?
No.
Okay. This other quote's from Allie Beth Stuckey. She says, "Toxic empathy," and I think that's an important probably definer there, I guess, whatever she's talking about. But toxic empathy says we must not only share their feelings, but affirm their feelings and choices as valid, justified, and good.
I think that's kind of what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Alex.
Here's the thing. I don't want to beat around the bush. So much of this, when it comes to these quotes and these things about empathy, to me, go right back to what you're talking about, Alex. And it's the gender politics. And this, I mean, a lot of it is, well, there's truth and there's not truth. And there's logic and there's not logic.
There's my truth.
Yeah, and so people are using this as a way to argue against what people believe about gender identities.
Yeah.
And so that's, I just can't help but read you just read right through the lines of it. And I'm not saying I disagree or agree. I just wish people were maybe more open with what they're actually talking about. Mm-hmm. Because when you're talking about truth, are you talking about biblical truth? Maybe. Are you talking about, but when it comes to, a lot of times it's this culture war of political identity, and I'm ascribing to a certain political party, and we're the truth tellers, and we'll tell truth without even considering people's feelings or emotions or what that means to them. But anyways, toxic empathy. Jess, is that a term that's used in as far as the therapy world?
I'm not exactly sure how she was meaning it, but I mean, that is, I can't remember like what's
like toxic positivity maybe or something like that.
But I do think, I mean, there is like empathy would be considered a stress response because of the changes that happen in your body and how you can engage with somebody. That's why empathy can really lead to burnout and can lead to some other things that we'll talk about later. Yes, like that is what's housed in there. And so
enabling people.
Yes. And so I think a lot of that can get wound up in that. And I think the problem that we see, especially like, I'm pretty sure this is an influencer. Like, we don't know how she's taking this and wrapping this around and like making this her own quote to like to make a point in a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, one of the things I've learned, even having like a brother that's an addict and like having conversations with one of my friends who is an addict, but he's been in recovery for over 10 years, is that balance of, okay, I understand this is a disease that I don't have. I don't struggle with that same disease. And so, but I do know I have a disease of sin that has my own bents towards certain things. And so from there, I'm empathetic towards they can't control it. But my friends cautioned me also to say, well, you take that so far that they can't control it, then you create this narrative that they're never going to get better. You know, that you don't put any of the fault on themselves, that, at some point they don't need to be held responsible for their actions because it's this disease that they can't control. And so you can get into the toxic maybe part of it. Like I've had those feelings where I'm like, okay, maybe that is kind of toxic to go that far into it because I have impulses, but I have to control those impulses. If I don't control my impulses, then my life is a wreck, right? And there's times and there's different levels of damage that those impulses can lead to. And so I can see how in my own life I've been tempted towards some toxic empathy.
Yeah.
And how maybe that's played out without fully understanding what she's meaning.
Because empathy, I don't think by itself doesn't mean that we're saying there shouldn't be accountability, right? Like I don't think those things are not mutually exclusive.
Yeah.
And so, you still have to have accountability. You have to have personal responsibility. You have to take responsibility for your actions. And that doesn't mean that empathy is dismissing all of that or excusing
I would say
it.
toxic empathy simply is neglecting your needs and putting someone else consistently over yourself and ignoring what's happening with you to value them.
Yeah. And to give context, I guess, Jess, you made me realize I should give context for, like, Joe Rigney is, he serves as a fellow of theology at New St. Andrews College and is an associate pastor of Christ Church. Allie Beth Stuckey is an American conservative commentator she has a podcast, and it's a podcast that's distributed by Blaze Media. Okay. Next quote. The man that doesn't need any introduction. Elon Musk, right? He said, the fundamental weakness of Western civilization is empathy. The empathy exploit. They're exploiting a bug in Western civilization, which is the empathy response. How do we feel about that one? Fundamental weakness of Western civilization is empathy. And if I were to dissect that, what I think he means is that people are able to exploit other people and make them think the way that they think by leveraging their empathy, right? So whether that is gender dysphoria or addiction or whatever it might be, it's like, well, if I can get you to empathize with my viewpoint, then I can manipulate
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. He kind of sounds like he's using that without saying it. Like we're talking about manipulation, or people are able to be manipulated.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's it is I would say in Western culture, there's probably more empathy, or at least, I mean, this is from my perception. I haven't lived, in the East, but I think there is more permission to feel. Mm-hmm. There's more permission in a society that has the rights and free speech and things like that to talk about our feelings, to share our feelings. But I think that kind of what you were saying, Eric, I think one of the dangers that could be in that is when we co-op our empathy to make everybody feel empathetic towards this exact same things that I'm experiencing, right? And I don't think everybody has the ability to feel that empathy towards everything. Mm-hmm. We would just drown in that. And so, for example, there's people maybe politically that really want us to focus on a certain injustice that's happening in the world. And we could say, yes, that is an injustice, whatever that is, what's happening in Gaza, or there's other injustices that are happening in the world, and they want us to feel the weight of all of that. And we just don't have the capacity to. There's also millions of Christians being murdered in other countries, and we're not having that same level of empathy. And so I think when we get in these empathy fights, maybe, then that's maybe where, I don't know, if it can become dangerous. Maybe that's, again, this is reading into, I don't want to overread into what Elon's saying there.
Right, like whole conversations people are having, and we're just seeing quotes of what they're saying.
But people will take these quotes. I mean, that's where some of it is, because they're a thought leader, because they have influence. People do this to
and this
Mark
is their
Ashton.
Quote when
people
you Google.
Do this to anybody that we can agree on as a thought leader, and then we use that as leverage. People do this to the Bible. They do this to the words of Jesus, and they will take that and use it as a ramming rod against other people. And so that's
out of context,
where it can become different. And so,
last quote we had is from recently deceased Charlie Kirk. This quote started going around a lot after he passed for a number of different reasons. People, whatever they're trying to argue for what type of man he was, I guess I could say that. But this quote, he says, "I can't stand the word empathy. I think empathy is a made-up New Age term, and it does a lot of damage." And then he goes on, and I think I've seen a lot of people just show that part of the quote and stop there, which, I mean, I would see that, I'd read that and immediately disagree and go, well, that's silly. But then he goes on to say, sympathy is a better word because empathy means you're actually feeling what another person felt, and no one can feel what another person feels. Thoughts? Silence. Crickets.
I don't think anybody could. I think it's wrong to say that I feel exactly what you feel. Like, yeah. I think that takes away a lot. I don't think that has ever gotten me ahead in a personal or a professional conversation by me saying like, oh, I know how you feel. Like, I get it. I think that there maybe is a time and a place in a conversation, but to be like, oh yeah, me too. Or like, Eric, you were talking earlier, like, oh yeah, my mom died too. Like that is a precious, like, terrible thing that happened to you, but it doesn't like necessarily create that connection. It feels like it takes away when we do that.
Yeah. When to me, it's like the definition that he's going for a very literal definition of empathy, which is, oh, if I stab Alex in the hand with a pencil right now, I'm going to feel that exact same pain for him if I have empathy. The exact same, the nerve endings are going to tingle the same way. I'm going to feel it one to one, which I disagree that that's what empathy is.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, if it's taken to that nuanced of or that centered in of a definition, then none of us have the ability to 100% feel empathy, even if, you can't even feel the same empathy with that tight of a definition as your sibling who also lost their mom because you were at 7 years younger. So you lost your mom when you were a teenager and they lost their mom when they were an adult. So how you both, the needs that you both had for your mom, were just different because of one being a male, one being a female, all of that. And so at that narrow of a definition, that yes, we can't have 100% empathy, but that's tough.
Well, and I think a lot of people probably have experienced empathy in one form or another, and it's probably served them in a positive way. But what I feel and what I sense is this leans back into this culture war that we're experiencing, where the word empathy gets thrown around, and it's like, oh, during COVID, well, if you don't wear a mask, then you don't have empathy, right? Like it goes into like, are we talking about virtue signaling or are we talking about empathy? Because it is two different things. I don't like it when someone's like virtue signaling and trying to tell me how I need to act or feel about a certain thing. And I think people can get very preachy about the subjects that they're passionate about, whether that is, the gender spectrum or,
being with your neighbors on Halloween.
Right. Being with your neighbors on Halloween, like some people on the podcast. But I think when people are virtue signaling, like, yeah, I'm not interested in that. It's going to shut me down right away. But what empathy does and what it can create is a space where people can explore different viewpoints and at least not agree or necessarily affirm, but understand. And I think people really, in a time of isolation and loneliness, need to at least feel like they're seen and understood by their, fellow humans.
Mm-hmm. I will validate that. I do believe what I'm trying to, what did he say? It can be seen as dangerous because I think that it can be. I think that it's something that we do need to watch out for, especially when we talked about earlier. It's like there's all these different systems that when we empathize with somebody that it affects. And if you're putting yourself into someone else's shoes, you might feel that same panic, fear, and hopelessness. And you might become overwhelmed by their distress and feel drained or anxious. And then there's another part where it's like you can get stuck in someone else's feelings and you can get there. And that can be very dangerous. To me, all of this stuff leads to feeling this emotional burden and almost too much that we are replacing Jesus in people's lives. Like we're having this whole body experience because I think Jesus made it that way. But this ultimately leads to burnout. And it ultimately leads to us feeling like we're the savior and we're the fixer and we're the feeler. And so I do think that empathy is a beautiful, amazing, connected way that we can care about other people. But it's dangerous. It
can be manipulated.
Absolutely.
Too.
And even just like empathy is my number one tool in meeting with people. I mean, I think that that's why people stay because I see them. I don't feel and justify everything they do. But if I don't guard against like, how is this affecting me? And how much is it affecting me? And being aware of my own, those responses that we talked about, that's dangerous. That's why therapists burn out. That's why pastors burn out. That's why friendships end. There's just like, especially the people that are natural caregivers, even if they aren't in any of those professions, they're just a naturally caring, empathizing person. Like this is stuff that it can be dangerous. So it's like part of me when they're saying that stuff, I'm like, yeah, I mean,
yeah, one of the things
there can be some truth to that.
I've learned is if I'm drowning in it with you, I can't help pull you out. And so a lot of times if somebody's coming to me or they're going to you, Jess as a counselor or to me as a minister, and they're looking for hope, and there's this level of I need to be empathetic, yet I don't want to drown in the hopelessness that you're maybe feeling because you're coming to me to help lift you from that or to get out of that situation. And so the level of empathy, and I think you touched on it, Eric, so often how we define words matters, and so we could use that word empathy to the very narrow definition that, yes, of course we can't feel anybody's, or you can use it to like this over emotive way on the other side definition that assumes that I can exactly feel all of your pain. And that's where I think it gets dangerous. I think for me, one of the things, I was part of a couple different funerals last week, and I think in doing those, empathy is a big thing. And often I try to take people to John 35. It's the shortest verse in the Bible. Jesus wept, but some of the context around that is I think empathy from Jesus. So Jesus in this moment, Mary is ticked off. She's one of his friends. He loves her. Lazarus has just died, her brother, and she's like, "Where were you, dude? Like, we sent for you when he was sick and you didn't show up, and now he is dead." And she's not, happy with Jesus in the moment. Yeah. And then, that short verse, John 11:35 says Jesus wept. That Jesus entered into the pain. I don't think Jesus wept because Lazarus died. He wept because of the pain that his friend was feeling because she just lost her brother. That's my understanding of it. And so Jesus wept. He didn't say, "Silly woman, I'm about to raise him from the dead. Where's your faith? You're an idiot. Just hold on." He didn't. He could have, because he knew what was about to happen. He was about to raise Lazarus from the dead, and he could have just said, "Get over it. Stop your crying. Just watch what I'm about to do," in a very brash kind of way. And he would have had the authority probably to do that. But he enters into her humanity. He enters into her pain by weeping with her. Paul often says, "Weep with those who weep, mourn with those who mourn." Jesus said in the Sermon on the Mount, "Blessed are those who mourn, for theirs is the kingdom of God." And so there's this real emphasis from Jesus on one becoming human and feeling the same pains and emotions and all of that we feel, that would lead us to believe that Jesus wants us to understand something about empathy. That the God of the universe has empathy, was willing to walk into empathy, which I think is just an important thing to know and realize as well. So,
and then I think we can get stuck in empathy and not realize that we also have a compassion response. And I think that that's the part where it's like we can get stuck in all these feelings, but it acknowledges compassion. To me, it acknowledges someone's suffering, but it also recognizes that someone's distress or their deep concern, we can be distressed and concerned for their well-being, but rather than feeling overwhelmed, we can feel motivated because we are taking that empathy and turning it into compassion of, okay, how does this help somebody? What can I offer? And that's the part I feel like that we miss sometimes, or we might get stuck in that emotions because we're not thinking like, man, I can pray for somebody. I can bring them a meal. I can put my love or feelings into action, or I can ask them what they need. And to me, that's the piece where when we're feeling empathy for somebody, we have to move through. Even okay, for me as a professional, I can sit in empathy, but then and feel that distress, or feel like my heart race or my mind races a little bit when I'm hearing a story, but I can move into compassion because it's like, man, I have great tools and I can see hope for them. And I can be a guide for them to help them move through whatever they're going through. And that changes our response. It engages different parts in our brain that even lessens that distress or the stress that we feel in empathy.
Yeah. I think that's good. And I think really, as we start to wrap things up here, I think as I'm processing this in the moment, is empathy is another tool that we can use to connect to people and understand people better, but it can't start there or stop there and be left alone. It can't just be empathy, right? And I think it can engage us, and then like you were mentioning, Jess, like compassion can kind of sustain us through that, and truth has to be kind of our guiding example. Like, yeah, you can maybe disagree with someone and say they're not living in truth. But I could still empathize with them so I can understand why they're in the place that they're at, and whether that, not to manipulate them to my perspective, but at least to understand their perspective. And, that, it's tough, I think, when we wrap it into a political climate where people are trying to win an argument. It's just, there's no room for any of that. There's no room for that nuance, because that's really not what it's about. It's not really about caring for other people as much as it is about being right. And I think that's where we don't leave room for empathy or compassion. And I think when it's looked at as an emotional weakness to be compassionate or have empathy, then that's the perception from that person is that they've lost the argument, that they've lost the debate, they've lost their battle, Yeah. Any closing thoughts as we start to wrap this up? Everybody, all shots are fired.
Yeah, I mean, I think when it's misused, it can lead to, like any tool, right? Like it can lead to more pain, more just trauma, more manipulation, all of those things.
Yeah.
And I think so it should be considered. It should be thought of using it rightly, using it, making sure it is attached to truth, making sure it's attached. Ultimately, truth is Christ, making sure that we use it with boundaries, that it pushes us towards compassion would be ways of using, I think, empathy rightly, and also knowing, hey, it can be misused, and we have to be aware of that. Just like a lot of emotions or feelings that we have, they're gifts that are given to us by God, but they make great passengers. They can suggest things to us along the road of life as we're driving. I need to listen to my emotions, but I don't want them to drive.
Yeah,
I don't want them to take the steering wheel because, man, I would be in a few ditches right now in my life if I let all of my emotions.
Yeah.
But there's times where I'm like, okay, I need to take the detour.
Yeah.
And you're right. I need to listen to those. I need to be aware of it. And I have to use wisdom, community to figure out how do we do that well.
Awesome.
Awesome.
I feel like I've had to think through this because I engage in this and I have to watch out for this every day for me. And so I just want to share, like, for me, like what I bring myself back to, what keeps me out of burnout is that empathy is a whole body experience. Because we're created in God's image. Jesus made himself to be flesh, to have our experiences. And so that's something that, like, I think about and engage in, and we're the body of Christ. And what does that look like to engage in people's suffering?
Yeah.
The Spirit dwells in our flesh and in our minds. And Jesus was the embodiment of Christ-like love. Like, he showed so many aspects of character. And so what does that look like for me? And that allows me to meet people I disagree with. It allows me to feel sad for someone that their gerbil died.
Yeah.
I maybe wouldn't feel the same, but it allows me to meet in that and to see people as image bearers. And I think that that's helped give me some distance and to see, and to also in that, when we're struggling maybe with empathy, to know Jesus has them and he is walking with them. And I do not have to be responsible for all of this person's feelings and emotions just because I can see them all. He is with them and he has got them.
Yeah.
And I can bring them to the throne by name every single day, and he's carrying them. And that to me helps me have empathy and compassion for other people. But we have to almost be on guard for it because it can lead to burnout. It can do a lot in us.
Yeah. That's really good. All right. Well, I think we'll end it there. I'll try to have empathy on all of our listeners, and they might be tired of hearing us. No, I'm just kidding. But if you have any thoughts, questions, concerns, sympathy, or empathy that you want to share with us, you can send us an email to podcast@cccomaha.org, or you can reach out to us on social media on Instagram or TikTok @CCCOMA Podcast, or send us a voicemail, ask us a question. We'd love to hear from you at 402-885-9930. But until next time, we'll talk to you then.